Traders, how are you? With Marcello, we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Economy, finance, so you can know how to take advantage of the new amazing world communist government that we're going to have soon. We have tanks rolling into France. We have Elon Musk starting new companies. And we even have great news when it comes to Ripple and cryptos this week, thanks to a judgment against the regulators in the US. Let's get started. So, biggest piece of the news this week was the inflation front. There was reported that the inflation was 3% year over year, even though you and I have talked before about how that's not really the right number, right? I always tell the story, which I know gets annoying after a while, but I went to Five Guys over, during the pandemic, 2020. 2 people, 2 combos, 2 burgers, 2 drinks, 2 fries, $20 for 2 people. Now, when I go to Five Guys, it's $20 just for me. Remember that the number that they give you for the inflation isn't the actual number, because if we do the math on that, that's about a 25 to 30% increase in the food in a span of every year for 2 years, because it doubled, right? So the inflation that they reported is the lowest in 2 years. The housing cost was the biggest driver in the inflation, fueling 70% of the price growth in June. So remember that even though that's what they report, that's not what the real number in inflation is, but that is good news for investors and the economy as a whole, because remember that as the central bank in the United States has increased interest rates, because we live in an over-financialized economy, meaning that we just have so much debt everywhere that any small move in the interest rate really affects the economy, because consumers at this point, there's no way to survive unless you're able to borrow money. It's to buy houses, to buy a car, to pay your credit card, where you put your expenses. So it's a really, really important number. And remember that consumer spending in the United States is almost 70% of the economy. Thanks to that, good news, because if the inflation is not going up anymore, or we quote unquote reach the peak, there's much more likelihood that the central bank in the United States isn't going to increase rates anymore, which means that it's going to be good for the economy, which means that they might lower rates, which will spur movement in the economy again. Markets in the United States, mostly positive thanks to that positive piece of news. Canada was positive as well. In overseas market news, the European markets were mostly higher. We got the stocks in Europe and also Istanbul around 4%. Latin America was mixed, with the I always say the República Eterna de Argentina, the Eternal Socialist Republic of Argentina being the mostly positive there. It's funny because they were the richest nation in the 1900s. They started voting for socialist policies for 70 years, and now they're not one of the poorest countries, but they're definitely third world, and they've been going backwards ever since. They have a financial collapse every 10 years, basically. Africa and the Middle East, mostly mixed. South Africa being the biggest winner there. And then the far, far east in Asia and that region, mostly mixed. Hang Seng in Hong Kong going up almost 6%, biggest market there. Crypto and Bitcoin news. Binance, the largest exchange in the United States, is laying off over 1,000 people. Now, after the United States has attacked the crypto space for so long, now we have some good news now that Ripple received a good judgment that part of their business, let's call it, isn't a security. Give a lot of investors hope. Binance and even Coinbase, I think both of them relisted XRP, which is part of Ripple, exploded 74%, and that a lot of the other crypto coins followed. Polygon went up 11%, Solana 8%, Cardano 7%, Bitcoin and Ether also went up 3% and 7% respectively. And Bitcoin is higher this week, 0.33%, still range bound. So it kind of got that bump and then it came back down. Interesting piece of news, Europe to launch its first spot Bitcoin ETF this month. And if you guys don't know what an ETF is, it's kind of being able to buy Bitcoin on the like a stock, rather than having to buy it directly from a crypto exchange. That's the really overall kind of general way to phrase it. But just for those of you guys that don't know what an ETF is, it's an index, basically an exchange traded fund. Celsius, which is the bankrupt exchange, paid a $4.7 billion settlement against the government regulators to settle their affairs with them. The CEO, Alex Mashinsky, was arrested on Thursday for securities fraud, one of the largest FTC fines in history. The largest is Meta, remember, that owns Facebook, a $5 billion fine in 2019. And now, speaking of Meta, it seems like the fizzle from Threads, the Twitter competitor, is kind of out. Everybody kind of just isn't using it anymore. The WEF, the World Economic Forum, is saying that CBDCs must be implanted under your skin. Get ready for the mark of the beast if you want to participate in society. And in commodities, per a McKinsey report, over 500 mines of cobalt, copper, lithium, and nickel operating today are going to need to be doubled to support the battery demand from electric vehicles. This is one of the reasons I really like silver, because silver goes into these batteries in addition to solar panels, which, this is all the craze now that government wants. So silver is definitely cheap. U.S. consumers drinking more OJ from Brazil than ever due to the worst. I don't know how you say that in English. In Spanish, you say cosecha, like when the fruit comes out. There's a specific name for it in English. Due to the hurricanes in Florida and the problems with the harvest, that's the word. In Florida, now people in the U.S. are drinking more orange juice from Brazil than from Florida. The harvest was more than half down from what it was a year ago. And oil is up on various things. There were fires in Mexico that cut about 700 barrels a day in production. There's been some disruptions also in Libya and Nigeria, and there's also been a fall of the USD, the dollar. The dollar now has dipped to a 2-month low. So remember that a lot of the commodities and raw materials are listed in dollars. So if the value of dollars go down, a lot of these things go up. So the SPR is now at the lowest level since 1983, thanks to the Biden administration depleting that 44%, not for any specific reason, because remember, the SPR is supposed to be a special emergency reserve. He was just trying to get the oil prices down. The U.S. crude went up over 2% to 75.42, while Brent is up almost 2% to 79.87. The Indian tomato crisis, prices have skyrocketed 341% to a record high. And weaker inflation this week has pushed the gold market to a 3-week high. Gold went up 1.55% to 1955 and change, while silver went up almost 8% to 24.96. Financial and banking news, dumpster diving in America. Now Americans are looking to go into a lot of these big restaurant dumpsters to be able to search for food and other household items. In the last 2 years, food inflation has risen nearly 17%. That's the official number. Remember what we talked about just a moment ago. The real question is, has your income risen 17%? So hope you get your side hustles on point. Cost of college tuition has gone up 710% since 1983, 1,200% if you go back to 1980. Meanwhile, the CPI has gone up 194%. The question is, has your income gone up 710% since 1983? Something to think about. The U.S. federal debt interest payments is about to hit $1 trillion. Remembering offhand, the budget, I believe, is $4.2 trillion. So literally, we're about to pay more in interest than absolutely anything. Back to school spending is set to drop for the first time in a decade, according to Deloitte. And corporate bankruptcies has reached the highest level since 2011. In June, there were 15 companies with more than $1 billion in liabilities that went bankrupt. So you can see some pieces of the news there where the economy isn't doing well. Bank of America has been ordered to pay $250 million for charging illegal fees and opening credit cards with accounts without customer consent. Remember, that's what Wells Fargo's did as well. I hate Bank of America. And UK mortgage rates on Tuesday climbed to their highest level since 2008. It's at 6.66%, deepening fears of a catastrophe. In the UK, I read, it's not like the US where everybody has a 30-year mortgage where the rates are low. I read that in the UK, most people have to renew their mortgages every 6 years or whatever it is. And so that can't be good because people are going to get raped and they're not going to be able to afford houses anymore. In political news, Uzbekistan's president changed the constitution to be able to stay in power after his re-election. He's going to go in for another 7 years. And it looks like in Spain, the socialists are going to be overturned by the right and the capitalists, the extreme right, and then also the center right. They we'll see what the elections hold there. They've been run by socialists for quite a while now. Economic news. Goldman Sachs, one of the most important financial institutions in the world, is saying that India is going to have the second largest economy by 2075. And then in corporate news, Lucid, the electric car maker, fell almost 12% on Wednesday after they missed their expectations on vehicle deliveries. This is also due to the supply chain issues in addition to the price war that Tesla started in January, which has intensified competition. Domino's Pizza went up over 11% after they announced that they're going to be able to order the pizza from Uber Eats and Postmates. Now the partnership is going to mean an extra $1 billion in new sales for Domino's. And Beyond Meat, the horrible processed not meat is going to go up over 13% now that they have their products in over 14,000 stores, including Wegmans and Whole Foods. Don't eat that stuff. It's horrible for you. Wednesday, Elon Musk announced that he's going to debut a new AI company called XAI, supposed to understand the true nature of the universe. And CEO Bob Iger in Disney is extending his reign as CEO for 2 more years into 2026. He's also talking about selling his TV assets like ESPN and ABC. One of the things I thought was really interesting about Disney, there was an article talking about how Disney is empty. It's July, the peak of the summer season. It looks like the extremely high cost, in addition to the woke propaganda, means a lot of people don't want to go to Disney anymore. The valuation of SpaceX, I'm looking at the numbers here. The valuation of SpaceX hit nearly $150 billion after the the company sold more shares to $81 a share. In trade news, India is looking to have a new free trade agreement with their previous boss, the United Kingdom. Investment news, the Microsoft bid to buy Activision Blizzard may clear a path now that a judge did not allow the U.S. government to stop them from purchasing it. Now there's only a regulator in the U.K. that's going to be able to stop them, so they'll probably continue with that purchase. And just in, armored vehicles were deployed in the streets of Marseille, France, as the chaos continues there with the riots. That's kind of what I think they want, because I think they want things to get so bad that they want to have martial law everywhere. Poland began moving 1,000 troops to the east of the country over the weekend. Remember that Russia sent nuclear warheads to Belarus. And Russia is saying that they lost over 26,000 men in the offensive, meaning, I said that backwards. Russia is saying that Ukraine lost that many men, 1,200 tanks and APCs. Colombian government is reaching, my dear Colombia, is reaching an agreement to begin peace talks with the FARC, who rejected a 2016 peace agreement. So there were about 3,500 soldiers that didn't want the peace agreement, and now they're doing a new peace agreement with them. And enormous downpours in the Northeast. The worst hit was Vermont and New York. It seems like, I don't know if you guys have noticed, we're going from, just a bunch of rain and flood warnings to too dry and there's no water to be had, just kind of going back and forth. All along the Southwest, there's a heat wave. Now they're expecting that heat wave to get to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 54 degrees Celsius. 93 million people are under a heat advisory, including Florida, the great state of Florida. An interesting fact this week, northern lights to be visible in 17 states, including Idaho. Not good, because that means that the magnetic field of the earth is not what it's supposed to be, because supposedly you're only supposed to see the northern lights in the north, which can cause other problems for us. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, the preppers were right.